Across the galaxy lie countless worlds that appear long dead. Their skies are choked with storms of ash, their surfaces barren and cracked. To any traveler of the void, these planets seem forgotten empty rocks, circling forgotten stars, unworthy of conquest or settlement. Yet beneath those wastelands, deeper than any mine or cavern carved by mortal hands, lie vast structures of black metal. They are not ruins, they are not abandoned. They are tombs, and not the kind that hold the dead. These are the tomb worlds, entire planets turned into catacombs, chambers stretching for thousands of miles, built with a precision that defies imagination. Buried within are legions of warriors who have not stirred for millions of years. They slumber in silence, their bodies cradled in stasis crypts, their weapons locked in vaults of impossible design. Above them the galaxy forgets, but beneath the crust they wait, patient as only immortals can be. Imagine walking the surface of such a world. The sand beneath your boots shifts with the dry winds, carrying fragments of glass and metal. The ruins that dot the horizon seem ancient, their angles too perfect, too deliberate, to be the work of nature. There is no sound but the hiss of dust and the occasional groan of stone breaking under its own weight. Yet, if you listen long enough, if you let the silence press upon your ears, you may hear it a faint hum, like a machine breathing. You might convince yourself it is your mind playing tricks, until the ground trembles ever so slightly, and a chill runs through the air. What truly lies in that darkness? What is it that slumbers beneath the deserts and mountains? Are they machines, mindless automatons waiting for a forgotten signal? Or do they dream still, their thoughts cold and patient, remembering a time when their kind ruled the stars? The galaxy does not tremble at rusting metal. It trembles because these legions were once alive, once rulers of an empire so vast and ancient that even the Im-Peer-E- cannot fathom its scale. They are the Necrons, immortal warriors, born of flesh but remade in living metal, their humanity stripped away in a bargain too terrible to comprehend. They are not demons, nor Xenos swarms like the Tyranids. They are older, colder, and far more deliberate. Where chaos is madness, the Necrons are inevitability. Where Tyranids consume, the Necrons reclaim. They are not the future of the galaxy, but its forgotten past returning to claim what was once theirs. When a tomb world stirs, the very heavens respond. Energy pulses awaken ancient systems. Pyramids of black metal, buried deep, begin to rise. The air fills with the sound of grinding stone and the crackle of green lightning. The ground splits open, spilling forth warriors of gleaming metal, their eyes lit with emerald fire. Entire armies march in perfect silence, their weapons humming with power older than humanity's first words. To witness such a sight is to understand futility. For these warriors do not bleed, they do not age, and when they fall their bodies crumble into dust only to reform again, carried back into the endless cycle of deathless war. The Imperium fears many enemies. It fears the warp and the legions of chaos. It fears the hunger of the Tyranids, the brutality of the Orks, and the cunning of the Eldar. Yet in whispered corners, among those who have seen too much, another fear is spoken of quietly. The fear of the Necrons, the fear of an enemy that does not tire, does not falter, and does not die. They are not coming from beyond the stars. They are already here, beneath our feet, waiting for the moment to rise. And so the question remains, what price will the galaxy pay when these legions awaken in full? What secrets have they buried with them? And why were those secrets left asleep in silence for so long? Perhaps it is mercy. Perhaps the galaxy was never meant to face what the Necrons have hidden. But mercy has its limits, and time eventually runs out. The tombs do not sleep forever. The dead metal stirs. The silence cracks. And when the day comes when every tomb world answers the call, when every buried secret awakens in unison, the galaxy will learn the truth of what waits in the dark. The silence of the tomb worlds is more than an echo of death, it is the echo of a story older than the stars themselves. To understand the Necrons, to grasp why they became what they are, one must first return to the age of their mortal beginnings. Before the legions of living metal marched in silence, there was a people who called themselves the Necrontyr. Their tragedy was not born of malice or greed, but of something far simpler, the cruelty of existence itself. The Necrontyr were cursed from the very moment of their birth. Their bodies, frail and brittle, carried within them a flaw they could never escape. Their lives were painfully short, burning out in a fraction of the span enjoyed by other races, where the Eldar lived for millennia, and humanity would one day rise with centuries of hope ahead. The Necrontyr knew only decades before sickness consumed them. Their skies offered little comfort. Their worlds were bathed in relentless radiation from hostile suns, which gnawed at their flesh and scarred their children even before they reached maturity. To be born Necrontyr was to begin dying from the very first breath. This curse bred despair, but despair soon turned to bitterness. Imagine an entire civilization aware of its fleeting existence, watching the stars with envious eyes, knowing that countless other beings enjoyed what they would never have time. Their monuments rose sharp and angular, not out of vanity, but out of defiance. Every spire was a cry against the inevitability of decay. Every city a monument carved with the desperation of a people who knew they were fading even as they built. Their culture became steeped in mourning and fatalism. Life was not celebrated, it was endured, and then it ended. Yet even in despair, ambition thrives. The Necrontyr turned their gaze outward, searching for answers among the stars. Their science advanced in leaps, driven not by curiosity but by desperation. They forged great vessels, black and angular, and spread their reach across the void. Entire systems fell under their grasp, not through joy of conquest, but through hunger for what others had. And in their travels they encountered those who would come to embody their deepest hatred, the Old Ones. The Old Ones were a race of incredible longevity and mastery. Over the warp, to the Necrontyr, they were an unbearable reminder of what they themselves had been denied. While Necrontyr lives gotted out like candles in the wind, the Old Ones endured, wise and serene, sculpting younger species, guiding them like gardeners shaping a forest. Every encounter deepened the wound. The Necrontyr's brief lives seemed only more pitiful when measured against the near immortality of the Old Ones. Resentment turned to rage, and rage to war. The Necrontyr launched campaigns against the Old Ones, hoping perhaps to destroy what they could not become, or at least to claim from them the secret of their endurance. But the war brought them nothing but more suffering. The Old Ones were powerful beyond reckoning, wielding mastery of energies the Necrontyr could scarcely comprehend. Their fleets were broken, their warriors slaughtered, and their brief lives burned away in the fire of hopeless conflict. For the Necrontyr, the war was a cruel mirror. They saw their mortality laid bare not only in the withering of their bodies, but in the futility of their ambitions. Every victory crumbled to ash. Every triumph lasted but a breath before decay claimed it. They had built an empire that stretched across the stars, yet all of it was hollow, a brittle shell around a dying core. The Old Ones endured, and the Necrontyr withered. Thus their tragedy deepened. They were a people cursed not only by nature but by knowledge. To know that others lived free of their burden, to see immortality in the hands of another, was a torment greater than death itself. And so, when whispers came of powers older than even the Old Ones, vast radiant beings slumbering in the heart of the stars, the Necrontyr did not hesitate. They sought them, desperate for hope, desperate for release from their endless despair. The fate of the galaxy would change forever when they found the C'tan, the so-called star gods. The Necrontyr had always raised their eyes to the stars with envy, but now they raised them with desperate hope. For in the blazing heart of suns, they discovered presences vast and incomprehensibly entities of living energy, being so radiant that their existence dwarfed even the glory of the Old Ones. These were the C'tan, the star gods. To mortal eyes they appeared as shifting curtains of brilliance, shapes that could never be fully grasped, only glimpsed in fragments. Where they drifted, gravity bent, and where they spoke, entire civilizations trembled. At first, the Necrontyr could scarcely comprehend what they had found. Here were creatures born of the stars themselves, not bound by flesh, not cursed by decay. They were eternal, unchanging, radiant with a power that seemed to answer the very longing in the Necrotyr's souls. To those who had known only suffering, the C'tan appeared as salvation. They were everything the Necrontyr could never be: mortal, vast, and untouched by the cruel lash of time. The Necrontyr reached out, and astonishingly, the C'tan answered. Drawn to the material realm by the promise of worship and the chance to taste physical existence, the star gods descended into bodies of living metal forged by Necrontyr hands. For the first time, entities of pure energy took form, striding as gods among mortals. Their voices were like the crackle of stars, their presence overwhelming. To kneel before them was to feel both terror and awe, as though the sun itself had taken human shape. The bargain came swiftly. The Necrontyr were a dying people, and the C'tan were beings who hungered. Though they did not feed on food or drink, they hungered for life itself, for the energy of mortal souls. The pact was simple: serve the star gods, and in return, the Necrontyr would be granted the immortality they craved. No more would they wither in decades. No more would their children be born only to suffer and fade. They would endure, everlasting, like the stars. It was a promise too sweet to resist. The leaders of the Necron-Tyr, the Tyark, gave their assent. Across their empire, priests and scientists prepared the ritual of transformation. The Necrontyr believed they were about to transcend, to shed their weakness and step into eternity as beings of power beside their gods. The Kutin guided the process, their motives cloaked in the brilliance of their presence. With technologies now lost to time, the Necrontyr constructed vast biotransference chambers. Each one was a labyrinth of machinery, wires, and conduits of living metal that pulsed with unnatural light. The people were led into them willingly, for who would not trade frailty for immortality? Families entered, rulers commanded, entire populations surrendered themselves to the promise. And so the great transformation began. Flesh was stripped away. Bone and blood were consumed by the process, replaced with necrodermis, living metal that could heal itself, endure any wound, and never decay. What emerged were forms stronger, faster, and more enduring than the frail creatures who had entered. To the eye it seemed the promise had been fulfilled. A race of immortals reborn in bodies that would never fail. But beneath the shining exterior lay a darker truth. The Necrontyr had been deceived. In the transference, something vital was lost. The Kutin had taken more than flesh. They had consumed the very souls of the Necron-Tyr. What emerged were no longer people but husks, consciousnesses bound within shells of cold metal, stripped of passion, stripped of warmth. Their individuality was diminished, their voices hollow. The immortality they had been given was real, but it was not life. It was a parody of it, an eternity without joy, without growth, without choice. The Necrontyr were no more. In their place stood the Necrons, an immortal legion of living machines bound in eternal service to their new gods. The bargain had indeed been fulfilled, but the cost was not salvation. It was the death of their very souls, a price far darker than they had ever dreamed possible. The transformation was irreversible. The Necrontyr's fragile bodies, once racked by disease and shortened lives, had been burned away. In their place stood frames of necrodermis, the living metal gifted or cursed by the Kutin. At first glance, this new form was everything the Necrontyr had ever craved: strength without decay, endurance without end, an existence unbound by the weaknesses of flesh. But hidden within this promise was a far more devastating truth. The price of immortality was not merely the shedding of flesh, it was the annihilation of self. The souls of the Necrontyr, already weary from their short and bitter lives, were consumed in the process. Their individuality, their memories, their laughter, their pain, all were torn from them and devoured by the star gods who had promised deliverance. What remained was a hollow echo, a mind imprisoned within a metallic shell, chained to eternity without truly living. Some retained fragments, blurred recollections of loved ones, faint flickers of loyalty, ambition, or sorrow, but even these were like ghosts screaming inside a coffin of iron. Most became little more than programmed weapons. Stripped of identity, obedient to the command protocols of their lords, where once there had been a civilization, there was now an army of silent machines, their footsteps ringing across endless tomb halls like a funeral dirge for a species erased. Imagine the moment of the first awakening, when the transfer had just been completed. A Necrontyr noble, once bathed in the light of his court and the embrace of kin, now opened cold metallic eyes. Yet as the first light fell upon him, he felt only emptiness, no heartbeat, no breath, no warmth within his chest. The voice that rose from his throat echoed hollow and distorted, a metallic ghost mocking the tone it once held in life. Around him, warriors stirred within their stasis sarcophagi, rising not as men but as soulless shells. There was no triumph, no joy, only silence, and the bitter realization that what had been promised as salvation was nothing more than a funeral dressed as victory. The lords, the pharaohs, and overlords of the dynasties retained more of their minds. They carried ambition still, though twisted and bound to an eternity of iron will. Beneath them, their soldiers were nothing more than drones, legions of warriors that could march without hunger, fight without fear, and die without end. This hierarchy was as rigid as the metal that bound them, a parody of the dynastic order they had once built in life. The Necrontyr had sought release from the cruelty of mortality. Instead, they had exchanged one curse for another. They had defeated time, but in doing so had lost the essence of what made them alive. The Kutan feasted on their souls, growing in power, while their mortal servants were reduced to empty husks, immortal, yes, but without purpose beyond war and servitude. And yet, within this tragedy lay the seeds of a darker future, for the Necrons were not simply tools. They were a force that could slumber for eons, waiting with infinite patience. They did not age. They did not falter. They did not forget their hatred of the galaxy that had outlived their flesh. Even robbed of their humanity, they carried with them the cold will of their dynasties, a determination that would one day reawaken. Thus the Necron-Tyr perished, and the Necrons were born immortal, merciless, and bound to a fate more terrifying than death itself. The galaxy above carried on, unaware of the silent armies entombed beneath its soil, waiting for the signal to rise. Those silent armies lay within the tomb worlds, planets turned into monuments of death by the dynasties of the Necrons. To the eye of an outsider, a tomb world may seem lifeless, a barren sphere of rock and dust drifting forgotten in the void. Yet beneath the surface lies a structure of unimaginable scale, an entire planet hollowed out, reshaped into a labyrinth of crypts and necropolises where the legions of the immortal rest. The architecture of these worlds is not simply functional. It is oppressive, monumental, and eternal. Towering pyramids of black stone and living metal pierce the bedrock, their sides etched with glyphs that shimmer faintly even after millions of years. Vast avenues stretch across subterranean plains, lined with statues of lords and warriors long turned to metal husks. Every corridor, every chamber, every monolith is part of a design intended not for beauty, but for permanence. A tomb world is less a city than a machine, one designed to endure time itself. Unlike the crumbling ruins of human civilizations, the constructions of the Necrons do not decay. Walls of necrodermis pulse with a strange vitality, repairing themselves when scarred, sealing cracks when pressure mounts. The structures appear more grown than built, as though the planet itself had been reshaped into an eternal fortress. In many tomb worlds, entire mountain ranges hide colossal sarcophagi, each one containing ranks of warriors stacked in endless silence, waiting for the command protocols to stir them. The scale is staggering. A single tomb world can house legions that rival the armies of the Imperium spread across dozens of systems. Beneath deserts, oceans, or frozen tundras, stasis vaults extend for miles, chambers layered one atop another in tiers that descend into planetary cores. These crypts are not scattered ruins, they are a deliberate, organized system. Dynastic capitals at the heart, command citadels aligned to the stars, defense bastions interlinked like nerves in a body. The entire planet is a weapon disguised as a grave. From orbit, little betrays the truth. Some tomb worlds are cloaked in energy fields that twist senses, presenting only the illusion of a lifeless rock. Others lie dormant, their surfaces scarred by eons of meteor impacts, hiding the pristine, untouched hulls below. Explorers from the Imperium, believing they have found a dead world rich in minerals, sometimes set foot on these planets only to awaken the sleeping lords within, unleashing a force beyond comprehension. The sheer artistry of the construction is terrifying. Colossal obelisks rise within cavernous holes, their tips sparking with dormant power. Bridges span voids large enough to swallow hive cities whole. At the center of many dynasties lies a grand necropolis, a city-sized pyramid complex, housing not only the warriors but also the ruling pharaoh, whose tomb palaces are carved from solid necrodermis and draped in the iconography of dominion. To walk those halls, should one survive long enough to glimpse them, is to feel utterly diminished, a reminder that the Necrons did not merely build for themselves, but for eternity. Yet there is also a disturbing order to it all. Every tomb world mirrors the rigid hierarchy of the dynasties. Soldiers placed beneath nobles, nobles beneath overlords, overlords beneath the pharaoh. Even in undeath, the empire maintains its caste, immortalized in stone and metal. The architecture itself enforces this order. Warriors are entombed in endless ranks, while their lords rest in chambers high above, suspended in regal stasis. It is not simply a fortress, it is a vision of empire, fossilized yet enduring, awaiting its resurrection. The true terror of a tomb world lies not in its silent halls or in its lifeless geometry, but in its purpose. These are not mausoleums meant to preserve memory, they are arsenals, vaults holding the dead until they are summoned back to war. Every wall, every corridor, every sealed crypt is part of a design that stretches across galaxies, a plan of patience, one that sees the passage of millions of years as nothing but a pause before conquest. The galaxy may look upon a tomb world and see a grave, but to the Necrons it is a cradle of armies, a promise that death itself has been bent to their will. And when the signal comes, the stillness will break, and the planet will awaken not as a resting place, but as a war machine rising from slumber. To outsiders, a tomb world seems nothing more than a vast graveyard, but to the Necrons it is a cradle of legions, proof that even death itself has been forged into their weapon. And when the signal comes, the silence will shatter, and the planet will not remain a tomb, it will rise as a war machine, stirring from its endless sleep. If the architecture of a tomb world is monumental, then its systems of preservation and defense are nothing short of terrifying. For millions of years, these planets have slumbered in silence, yet their machinery has never faltered. The Necrons designed their resting places not merely as shelters for the dead, but as engines of eternity, mechanisms to keep their legions intact until the moment of awakening. At the heart of this preservation lies the stasis crypt. Each warrior of the Necrons, from the lowest foot soldier to the highest noble, rests within a sarcophagus of necrodermis lined with stasis fields. Time itself slows within these vaults, holding every machine body in perfect suspension. Metal does not corrode, energy does not fade, and the spark of the artificial soul, the engram of the warrior's mind, remains unbroken. A soldier entombed for 60 million years can awaken as if he had lain down but yesterday. The preservation extends far beyond the warriors. The very halls of the necropolises are laced with repair systems, nanoscopic swarms that glide through walls of living metal, sealing fissures and restoring glyphs as though the passage of millennia were nothing. Entire repair bays lie dormant beside the crypts, where damaged lords can be reforged, limbs replaced, and armor polished back to perfection. Even the Pharaoh, supreme rulers of the dynasties, slumber in palaces equipped with machinery so advanced it borders on sorcery, ensuring that when they awaken they rise not as relics but as kings reborn. Yet the tomb worlds are not defenseless vaults, they are traps. Any who trespass upon their soil are rarely aware of the doom that coils beneath. At the faintest disturbance, defense protocols stir. Obelisks, buried in sand, rise to emit beams of annihilation that reduce intruders to ash. Drone constructs patrol corridors, silent sentinels with no need for rest or orders. Automated turrets, hidden beneath mountains of rock, unfold with mechanical precision, firing blasts that can shatter armored columns. The most dreaded guardians are the canoptic constructs, mechanical beasts designed to tend the tombs yet equally capable of slaughter. Scarab swarms, each no larger than a coin, pour forth like rivers of metal insects, stripping intruders of flesh and armor alike in moments. Wraiths, phase-shifting hunters, drift through walls as though stone were air, their claws tearing apart prey while their forms flicker between dimensions. Spiders, vast arachnid machines, maintain the integrity of tomb structures but turn into executioners the moment alien footsteps echo in their halls. These defenses are not random, they are orchestrated, woven into the very fabric of the tomb world. Layers of overlapping systems ensure that even if one guardian fails, another awakens to breach such a world as to enter a gauntlet of traps laid with inhuman patience. Calibrated not for days or years, but for epochs, explorers from the Imperium have recorded brief, desperate encounters with these defenses, distress signals filled with screams, static, and glimpses of metallic horrors before all fall silent once more. Few such transmissions ever reach the wider galaxy. What makes these defenses most terrifying is their autonomy. They do not require orders, nor do they falter when their masters sleep. The tomb world itself is the warden, its will carried out by machines of eternal vigilance. A dynasty may slumber, yet the world still breathes, still guards, still waits. In this way, the Necrons achieved what no other empire could. They created guardians that never tire, soldiers that never forget, and prisons that hold not only their enemies, but themselves, until the time is right. To the eyes of the living, this is unnatural, a defiance of decay, of time, of the natural cycle of life and death. But to the Necrons it is perfection. What need is there for harvests, for birth, for the fragile continuation of bloodlines, when one can simply endure? What need for vigilance when an entire planet serves as sentinel? They cast aside the burdens of flesh and time, trading mortality for permanence, and in doing so, created worlds that stand unbroken while entire species have risen and fallen in the stars above. Most in the galaxy assume these worlds are nothing more than dead husks, yet in truth, they are coiled springs, loaded with the patience of millions of years. And when the hour comes, when the protocols are unleashed, the tomb worlds will not wake slowly. They will erupt, entire planets stirring as one, defenses flaring, sarcophagi breaking open in thunderous waves. The dead will rise not as shambling corpses, but as legions of gleaming metal, perfectly preserved, perfectly armed, perfectly prepared. To stumble upon such a world is not to discover ruins, it is to trigger an ambush, a trap laid not for wanderers alone, but for entire civilizations. A tomb world is both cradle and snare, both sanctuary and arsenal. It sleeps, yes, but never truly rests. After millions of years of slumber, the tomb world awakens. Silence fractures as stasis crypts hum, energy fields rippling across countless sarcophagi. Massive halls, carved from necrodermis and etched with runes older than memory, stretch endlessly. Columns rise like skeletal fingers, ceilings arch overhead, and shadows coil across the stone floors. Dust rises, stirred by movements unseen for millennia. One by one, sarcophagi slide open with mechanical precision. Legions of Necrons emerge, their metal limbs glinting in flickering energy. Eyes glow cold, unfeeling, scanning the empty halls. There is no hesitation, no confusion, only the perfect execution of ancient protocols. The echo of their synchronized steps reverberates through vast corridors. Every movement is calculated, every formation flawless. Above the crypts, massive spires of necrodermis shift and flare, energy coursing along conduits built to last eons. Mountains and rock formations shudder as the tomb world itself seems to respond to the awakening. Dust clouds rise from collapsed surfaces. Sparks of power streak across walls, and the hum of ancient machinery fills every chamber. The planet is not alive, yet every system vibrates in unison. Scarab swarms pour from hidden tunnels, mechanical hunters glide along walls, and drones patrol the vast expanse overhead. Each unit moves as one entity yet retains independent capability. There is no fear, no hesitation, no errantly relentless precision, and absolute coordination. Every Necron functions as a part of the whole, yet each is ready to act alone if necessary. The Pharaoh stands upon an elevated throne, observing the awakening of his armies. Commands pass not through speech, but through the dynastic network, linking every construct, every soldier, every guardian. The empire slumbers no longer. It becomes a single instrument of war. Beneath the ground, Necron's lords rise, armor gleaming, weapons humming with stored energy. The air vibrates with anticipation, as if the very planet holds its breath. Observers from distant systems register anomalies too late. Sensors, long thought dormant, flare as the tomb world activates. Spires erupt from the ground. Automated defenses ignite. Entire battalions that have slept for millions of years step into the open, a tide of perfected metal, synchronized and immovable. Dust clouds rise as energy fields flare, amplifying the terrifying spectacle. Every chamber and corridor contributes to the spectacle. Light refracts off polished necrodermis, casting shadows that seem to move with their occupants. Hallways that once confined the army now direct their motion like channels of steel. Echoes of motion, the hiss of released energy, and the rhythmic march of thousands combine into a symphony of awakening. The tomb world is not merely stirring, it is orchestrating. From deep within, the tomb world reaches full activity. Armies surge in waves, formations precise, intent singular, to reclaim the galaxy for the Necron's dynasties. Dust rises, energy flares, pulse, yet every soldier, every construct, every lord holds ready, poised to extend the empire beyond the planet. Even as silence returns briefly between the movements, tension remains. The machine-perfect legions are waiting, eternal, patient, and unstoppable. Nearby civilizations assume the world remains inert, unaware that every system, every construct, every protocol has awakened after eons. What rises is perfection in metal, patience, and coordination, ready to execute plans laid down long before any observer existed. The tomb world sleeps no more. Its armies are aligned, its mechanisms perfected, and the long-forgotten empire stands ready to move once more. Even as the tomb world awakens, deeper mysteries lie hidden beneath its surface. Beyond the gleaming legions and humming machinery, secrets buried for eons remain locked away. The Necron dynasties do not merely rely on their armies. Ancient power, forgotten knowledge, and the remnants of divine betrayal still pulse quietly in the shadows. These are the secrets that the galaxy cannot yet perceive, and they are far deadlier than the warriors walking the surface. Deep beneath the surface of the tomb world, immense weapons lie in silence, their presence almost forgotten even by the Necron themselves. These armaments are not mere tools of war, they are monuments to a time when the dynasties of the Necron-Tyr ruled before the bargain with the Khitan. Massive doomsday cannon batteries, stretching hundreds of meters along reinforced necrodermis platforms, are aligned with precision so exact that even the smallest deviation could nullify their destructive potential. Each barrel hums with contained energy, waiting for the precise command to unleash a storm that could shatter entire planetary systems. Particle disruptors of terrifying scale sit within massive energy chambers. Their cores glow faintly, a reminder that these devices are older than most stars still burning in the galaxy. The conduits leading from them twist and coil through the planet like veins, channeling immense power with absolute efficiency. When activated, The disruptors can collapse atomic structures, unraveling matter with precision that surpasses even the most advanced technologies of the Imperium. Dust rises and tremors ripple through the tomb world as if anticipating their activation. Yet all remains perfectly still for now, the silence masking a latent devastation. Temporal destabilizers, perhaps the most arcane of these weapons, lie in isolated vaults at the planet's core. Encased in layers of necrodermis and reinforced by fields of anti-entropy energy, these devices can distort time itself in localized regions. A strike of such a weapon could halt an advancing fleet in mid-orbit age structures into dust, or accelerate decay across entire battlefields. They are protocols of destruction written long before the rise of human empires, designed with patience measured in eons. The Necron architects intended these devices to wait, dormant, until the moment when their strategic use would be decisive beyond imagination. Smaller weapons, though less massive, are equally formidable. Squads of autonomous canoptic constructs patrol corridors throughout the tomb world, each armed with Gauss accelerators, disruptor rays, or phased energy lances. They are designed not only to attack but to coordinate, linking through dynastic networks to respond instantly to any threat. Each pulse of energy, each calibration of targeting systems, is perfect. Even the slightest interference would trigger self-correcting adjustments, ensuring lethal precision. The atmosphere around these weapons carries a quiet tension. Light reflects off polished NEH-CRO-DIR-MIS, flickering across control panels and conduits. Shadows dance in rhythm with the hum of dormant energy. Sparks occasionally leap along conduits, illuminating the depth of the weapon vaults. Dust motes float in these beams of light, the small and fragile contrasting sharply with the massive instruments of annihilation. Every surface speaks of millennia of construction, planning, and perfection, a silent warning that these weapons were never intended for mere defense. They exist to obliterate. Even if the Imperium were to discover only a fraction of this arsenal, the weapons themselves would respond, unleashing devastation beyond comprehension. Fleet formations could collapse within moments, shattered by beams of focused energy. Planetary fortresses might crumble under pulses of calibrated destruction. Even the most advanced Xenos technologies would fail against devices designed with patience and precision measured in millions of years. The Necron dynasties have not merely stored power, they have perfected it, creating interlocking systems of annihilation that function flawlessly across the eons. And yet, despite this terrifying capability, the weapons remain patient. They wait for the command protocols to awaken, for the Pharaon or other dynastic lords to issue the ancient commands. Their silence is not weakness, it is calculation. Each device, from the largest particle cannon to the smallest autonomous defense drone, embodies the Necron's timeless philosophy: precision, patience, and inevitability. The galaxy may never fully comprehend the scale of this power, for most will never witness its deployment. In the hidden chambers of the tomb world, the weapons stand as eternal sentinels, dormant yet alert. Power pulses through energy conduits, ready to ignite at a moment that may arrive after millions of years. They are reminders of the Necron dynasty's mastery, of civilizations that existed before humanity and Xenos alike. These armaments are not simply tools, they are statements, legacies of a time when stars themselves feared the names etched in necrodermis holes. Every corridor, every chamber, every vault contains the silent promise of annihilation. These weapons are not for display, not for ceremony. They are for execution, for the restoration of dynastic rule across the galaxy. Buried and hidden, yet prepared, they wait in perfect patience, and when the hour comes, they will awaken with a force so absolute that the galaxy will remember only the cold inevitability of the Necrons. Even as the weapons lie in silent readiness, a deeper and quieter secret stirs within the tomb world. Not all Necrons are entirely devoid of memory. Some retain faint echoes of the lives they once led as Necrontyr. These fragments of consciousness persist, trapped in armor and necrodermis, flickering like distant stars in the void. They are shadows of former selves, remnants of ambition, desire, and fleeting emotion confined within constructs of metal and energy. Within the deepest vaults, nobles and lords sit in stasis crypts, their metal forms seemingly lifeless. Yet, within their circuits and dynastic networks, memories whisper, a fleeting recollection of courtly intrigue, a fragment of a family name, a shadow of one's vivid ambition. Though these Necrons cannot act on these impulses freely, they are bound by command protocols. And dynastic command, the echoes of former humanity, shape subtle tensions in their otherwise flawless operations. Some warriors seem to hesitate, not from fear, but from a shadow of recollection that stirs in the mindless perfection of their routines. The faint memory of laughter, of music, of lives lived and lost, surfaces for a moment before being suppressed by protocol. These are glimpses of a self that no longer exists, imprisoned by the very immortality they sought. Yet even in this confinement, a quiet yearning remains, the faint desire to reclaim a soul, to recover something lost before the bargain with the Khitan transformed them into metal and machine. The planetary network amplifies these flickers of consciousness. Memory echoes ripple through dynastic links, subtle and nearly imperceptible to the untrained observer. Sparks of emotion pulse through nih-crow-dermis, barely enough to disturb the vast silence of the tomb world. Even lords that command legions feel the faint tug of what once was, though their actions remain perfectly executed, perfectly synchronized, and perfectly lethal. These imprisoned echoes create a tension between past and present, between memory and mechanism. The Necrons march, obeying orders written in the language of dynasties, yet the faint traces of former selves linger. They cannot act freely, but these shadows exist, shaping them in ways almost imperceptible to the galaxy at large. It is as if a whisper of life remains within an ocean of cold precision, a reminder of the price of immortality. In some crypts, it is rumored, the echoes are stronger. Noble lords retain enough recollection to recognize ancient allies or ancient enemies long erased from the stars. The faint light of recognition passes between armor and memory, a quiet acknowledgement of kinship, rivalry, or betrayal. Command protocols suppress overt action, but the spark of identity refuses to vanish entirely. The tomb world becomes a place where the past lingers not in ruins, but in the perfect machinery of immortal soldiers. Observers who manage to glimpse these moments of internal conflict report sensations difficult to comprehend. The silence is not merely absence, it is layered with echoes, faint, almost imperceptible, like whispers behind thick stone. A flicker of recollection, a shadow of ambition, a ghost of desire hidden within metal. The Necrons are eternal, yet within that eternity, a quiet rebellion of memory endures. The more one studies the Necron dynasties, the more evident it becomes. Immortality is not simply unending existence, it is a prison. Each step forward, each execution of ancient protocols, carries the weight of centuries of memory lost and fleetingly remembered. Even the most perfect execution of command is shadowed by a ghost of humanity, trapped within circuits and nih-crow-der-miss. This is the hidden secret of the tomb worlds. They do not merely harbor weapons or legions, they harbor the faint sparks of what was once alive. Souls captured, not destroyed, lingering beneath the surface, waiting perhaps for the day when protocols might falter and memory might awaken fully. Though the galaxy knows only the metal armies, the silent whisper of the past remains hidden, a truth as dangerous and compelling as any weapon. Beneath the surface of the tomb world, deeper still, lie the remnants of the Ket and the shattered star gods once worshipped by the Necron-Tyr. These fragments, though broken and imprisoned, radiate immense energy, pulsing quietly through necrodermis chains and energy restraints that bind them to the planet's core. Though no longer whole, their influence lingers, subtle distortions in reality, flickers of light that dance across the stone walls, and vibrations that hum through every corridor. The shards are not alive in the conventional sense, yet they are far from inert. The chains that hold them are both physical and arcane, forged in the age before humanity took its first steps among the stars. They are designed to contain godlike power, to prevent the fragments from consuming the tomb world or the Necrons who guard them. Energy fields shimmer across the surfaces of the imprisoned Khitan, creating faint auroras that reflect off polished nih-crow-der-miss. Sparks leap from containment conduits, and the air seems to vibrate with potential. Even a single breach, a crack in the centuries-old bindings, could release unimaginable devastation. Despite their imprisonment, the shards of the Khitan influence the Necrons themselves. In proximity to these remnants, soldiers and lords feel subtle, inexplicable urges, protocols executed with slightly greater precision, weapons calibrated more perfectly, movements sharper than usual. These are not conscious manipulations, the fragments are too fractured for thought as mortals understand it, yet their presence subtly reshapes the behaviors of those around them, reminding the galaxy that even broken divinity retains power beyond comprehension. Energy pulses from the shards, faint yet constant, ripple through conduits linking vaults across the tomb world. The pulses are rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, though far slower than any organic rhythm. They resonate in the nih-crow-dermis floors, through walls, and along spires rising from the depths. The vibrations are enough to shift dust particles, to illuminate etched runes with flickering light, to cause distant sarcophagi to hum in response. These are whispers of the C'tan's former glory, quiet yet inescapable, threading through the planet like veins of ancient power. In isolated chambers, the remnants glow brighter, their energy radiating outward in shifting patterns. Sparks crawl along containment conduits, illuminating geometric shapes and strange glyphs engraved into neat -crow-der-miss. Light dances in patterns that seem almost purposeful, hinting at comprehension, at thought that existed long before even the oldest Necron could measure time. Scholars who have glimpsed these chambers speak of vertigo, of a sense that the universe itself bends in recognition of the shard's presence. The combination of containment and time has not diminished the shard's potential. Though fractured, each piece of a C'tan remains capable of catastrophic influence if released. Localized gravitational distortions, temporal anomalies, and destructive energy surges could ripple outward, consuming entire star systems in moments. The Necrons, masters of patience, understand this implicitly. They guard these remnants not out of reverence, but out of necessity. A misstep could awaken forces beyond their control, forces that could unmake the galaxy itself. Some lords theorize that these fragments still harbor memories from when the C'tan were whole. The whispers might carry knowledge of the past, secrets of creation, of stars, of the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Accessing this knowledge, however, would require both courage and extreme risk. Even a fragment's influence can alter reality, warp time, or bend soldiers' minds in ways unpredictable to mortals. The remnants are both treasure and curse, capable of amplifying the Necron's power while threatening catastrophic chaos if mismanaged. The shard's energy threads through every level of the tomb world, touching weapons, soldiers, and vaults alike. Their presence is a quiet warning to any who might trespass. The galaxy knows only the surface, the armies, the weapon arrays, the legions of metal but beneath. These fragments pulse, waiting. Patience is infinite here, as the Necrons themselves are eternal. The fragments of divinity will endure, their potential growing with each passing millennium, until the protocols align and the hour comes to either remain contained or, perhaps, to strike across the stars. Even in brokenness, the C'tan remnants assert their presence. Silent, restrained, yet endlessly potent, they are the hidden core of Tombworld's true threat. The Necrons are perfect soldiers, but it is the quiet, fractured divinity beneath them that could one day remake the galaxy or annihilate it entirely. The Tombworld is more than a sleeping army. It is a vault of godlike secrets, waiting for the moment when the past's power might awaken fully. As the Necrons rest within their Tombworlds and the C'tan shards lie restrained, the future waits silently, indifferent to the passing millennia. The galaxy remains unaware of the true scale of the threat, perceiving only glimpses of ancient metal armies, unaware of the full arsenal, the imprisoned divinity, or the echoes of lost Necrontyr souls. The potential for devastation is measured not in years, but in millions of years of patient planning. Command protocols continue to hum through necrodermis conduits, linking every sarcophagus, every vault, every weapon system. Should a lord awaken, even partially, a chain reaction could unfold. Weapons would align, energy flows would synchronize, and the full might of a Tombworld could be unleashed with terrifying precision. Entire planetary systems could be erased before the Imperium, Xenos, or even rogue factions fully comprehend the source of the destruction. The echoes of former Necrontyr consciousness add subtle unpredictability to this deadly equation. Some lords, retaining faint memories, might act with ambition or cunning beyond protocol. These remnants of thought, though constrained, could shift strategies in ways even the most advanced Necrons cannot predict. It is a reminder that while immortality brings perfection, it does not erase the shadows of the past. Energy from the C'tan shards continues to pulse, faint but persistent, seeping into every level of the Tombworld. Though imprisoned, their power could amplify Necron weaponry, warp reality locally, or influence time in small, almost imperceptible ways. The combination of patient soldiers, godlike shards, cryptic oversight, and millennial weapon arrays makes each Tombworld not just a fortress, but a potential galaxy-altering event waiting to occur. The galaxy's current conflicts are but prelude. Imperial fleets clash with Orks or Tyranids, unaware that somewhere in the void, dormant Tombworlds lie in wait. Each silent planet contains not only soldiers and weapons, but the potential for an event that could redefine the balance of power entirely. The Necrons do not rush. Their patience is infinite, their strategies timeless. They move with inevitability. Scholars of the Imperium who have theorized about the Necrons' true capabilities speak of a slow awakening across multiple tomb worlds. Each planetary awakening could strengthen neighboring systems, creating a web of destruction that, once fully activated, might rival the power of the Keton themselves. Coordination occurs not by speech or signal, but through ancient dynastic networks, subspace conduits, tesseract labyrinths, and energy resonances that only Necrons can perceive. The true threat is subtle, patient, and almost invisible. Unlike the Tyranids who consume openly or chaos, whose incursions are violent and conspicuous, the Necrons wait, invisible yet absolute. They plan across eons, anticipating every countermeasure, exploiting every weakness in the galaxy's defenses. When the time comes, the galaxy will not see them approach, they will already be upon it. Even now, faint tremors from deep within tomb worlds can sometimes be detected. Slight pulses of energy, minor distortions in subspace, flickers in the warp. These are the whispers of a power that refuses to remain silent forever. The Necrons' future threat is not merely in their numbers or weapons, but in their inevitability. Every cycle, every century, every millennium brings them closer to awakening fully. Ultimately, the tomb worlds are not just repositories of death, they are archives of power, patience, and ancient ambition. The galaxy might survive for now, but the Necrons do not measure time in decades or centuries. They measure it in millions of years, and their reckoning is coming. When it arrives, nothing will be spared, and the silent promise of destruction buried beneath countless worlds will finally be realized. The galaxy of the 41st millennium is a place already burdened by unending conflict. The im-peer-e-e-em of man bleeds daily against chaos incursions, xenos invasions, and internal decay. And yet, amidst this endless war, another ancient menace has begun to rise again, one older, colder, and far more patient than any of the galaxy's better-known foes. The Necrons, long thought to be little more than myths or forgotten machines, now awaken in growing numbers. Their tomb worlds, scattered across the stars, no longer remain silent graves, but erupting arsenals of war. For the Imperium, their reawakening is catastrophic. The entire regiments of the Astra Militarum Humanitas Guard have been wiped out in hours by disciplined volleys of Gauss fire. These weapons, which strip matter down to its atoms, render tanks, fortifications, and even entire battalions useless. Against such technology, the lasguns of the Guard are as sparks against a storm. The Guard, known for their ability to endure overwhelming odds, often find themselves annihilated before they can even mount a counterattack. Survivors, if any remain, speak of metallic legions advancing in perfect silence, their formation never breaking, their movements never faltering. Even the Adeptus Astartes, the Emperors, angels of death, are not spared humiliation. These genetically enhanced super soldiers, revered as near invincible, have found themselves outmatched not only by the resilience of Necron warriors, but also by the sheer precision of their dynastic commands. The Damnus campaign, remembered with bitterness among the Ultramanes, stands as a grim warning. There, an entire chapter faced the fury of an awakening tomb world. What they encountered was not a chaotic rabble of mindless constructs, but a calculated, relentless onslaught. Necron overlords directed their legions with machine-perfect clarity, and every strike was measured, every maneuver precise. The Ultramanes did not lose because they lacked courage, they lost because their enemy fought with the patience of eternity. The Orks, a species infamous for their boundless aggression and sheer resilience, have fared little better, where Orks typically overwhelm foes through sheer numbers and reckless ferocity. Their crude weapons and ramshackle war machines crumble against Necron technology. Gauss fire reduces mobs to ash in seconds, while phase-out maneuvers allow Necron forces to disappear and redeploy before Orks can even react. Even Ork war bosses who boast of victories against nearly every other foe in the galaxy find themselves baffled when an enemy refuses to die, refuses to flee, and refuses to give them the brawl they crave. For Orks, combat is life, but against the Necrons, combat becomes futility. The Tyranids, however, present perhaps the most fascinating clash. These extragalactic swarms are organisms built for endless consumption, stripping worlds of all biomass in their path. Yet when a Tyranid fleet descends upon a tomb world, the battle does not unfold as it does on a typical planet. The world itself awakens as a fortress. Mo-NOL-ITH-IC structures rise from the ground, automated defenses open fire with inhuman accuracy, and the Necron legions march without fear of being consumed. Unlike other prey, the Necrons offer nothing. The Tyranids can harvest no flesh, no sustenance, no organic weakness. What results is a brutal stalemate. The Tyranids swarm in mindless hunger, only to be met with weapons designed to strip even the hardiest bioforms into molecules. Entire hive swarms have been shattered against such defenses, though never without cost. For the Necrons, the Tyranids represent not just another foe, but another test of endurance, one they are uniquely suited to withstand. These conflicts illustrate the horrifying truth. The Necrons are not a passing threat, nor a rising empire to be fought and eventually toppled. They are a steady resurgence, emerging not all at once but piece by piece, dynasty by dynasty. Each tomb world that awakens adds to the slow tide of their return. The Im-Peer-E- may be able to defeat them in isolated campaigns, but every victory is temporary, for Necrons do not stay defeated. They phase out, repair, and return in greater numbers. And yet, to think of the Necrons as a single, united force would be misleading. Behind the cold uniformity of their legions lies a complex web of dynastic rivalries and fractured ambitions. Some rulers rise with memories fragmented echoes of the Necrontyr they once were, while others awaken as little more than calculating war machines. This internal divide shapes the way their forces act across the galaxy. It is here that we begin to see the full shape of the Necron menace, not just as an unstoppable war machine, but as a civilization of the dead, fractured yet dangerous, silent yet ambitious. Their diversity, and the hidden motives of their leaders, will determine whether they rise merely as predators of the stars or as kings reclaiming a throne they still believe is theirs. Yet to the wider galaxy, this fractured truth remains concealed beneath a mask of uniformity and illusion few survive long enough to question. What the galaxy sees instead are the cold legions of the Necrons, identical warriors marching in silence, ships moving with mechanical precision, and dynasties awakening as if bound by a single will. But this apparent unity is a lie. Beneath the surface lies a reality far more complex, a patchwork of ancient dynasties, each ruled by its own overlord, each shaped by fragmented memories and faded echoes of the Age of Flesh. Some of these rulers awaken with clarity, recalling the pride of the Necrontyr civilization and the promises of the Silent King. They see themselves not merely as warlords but as monarchs destined to reclaim a galaxy that was once denied them. Such leaders rebuild cities of living metal, restore ancient protocols of governance, command protocols, and attempt to impose order upon both their subjects and their rivals. For them, the galaxy is not only a battlefield, but also a crown to be seized. Others, however, rise as something far darker, their memories shattered, their minds corroded by endless millennia of stasis. These overlords awaken not as kings but as butchers. They pursue war for its own sake, driving their legions into slaughter without concern for rebuilding or ruling. To such leaders, existence itself is reduced to the execution of destruction. They do not seek empires, they seek extinction. For the Imperium and other species, these dynasties are the most terrifying of all, for there is no reasoning, no strategy to anticipate annihilation delivered with machine perfection. Between these extremes exists every shade of ambition and madness. Some dynasties awaken with obsessions bordering on the incomprehensible, cataloging stars, hoarding relics, hunting shards of the Keton, or enacting rituals whose meaning even they no longer remember. These motives, bizarre to outsiders, nonetheless drive campaigns of conquest across light years. To the Necrons themselves, there is no contradiction. They are eternal, and eternity allows for every obsession, no matter how strange. This internal diversity makes the Necrons all the more dangerous. While humanity or the Orks might splinter into factions that weaken one another, Necron dynasties rarely destroy themselves in civil war. Their rivalries are vast and ancient, yes, but when their interests align even briefly, they combine with terrifying efficiency. An alliance of dynasties can unleash fleets capable of sterilizing entire sectors, and then vanish once their purpose is fulfilled, leaving only silence and ruins behind. What sets the Necrons apart from other threats of the galaxy is not only their power but their patience. Chaos strikes in storms of madness, Tyranids descend in waves of hunger, and Orks surge in tides of violence. Each of these enemies is terrible, but all are bound by momentum. They come fast, they strike hard, and they burn themselves out. The Necrons, by contrast, advance like the slow turn of a planetary cycle. They rise, withdraw, rebuild, and rise again. A dynasty defeated in one era may return millennia later, stronger and more prepared, its enemies long forgotten or reduced to dust. This patience is not passive, it is strategy. The Necrons do not need to win today, or even tomorrow. They need only to endure, to wait for their opponents to decay under the weight of time. And in a galaxy where the Imperium rots from within, where Xenos fight endless wars against each other, and where chaos gnaws ceaselessly at the veil of reality, time is a weapon sharper than any Gauss blade. To fight the Necrons, then, is to fight inevitability. An army can defeat a tomb world, a fleet can repel their ships, but these are victories measured in years, not in centuries. The Necrons measure in millennia. Against such scale, the achievements of mortals seem like sparks flickering in the dark. This is why many Imperial scholars whisper, though never loudly, that the Necrons may be the most formidable threat of all. Not because they are the loudest, but because they are the quietest. Not because they consume everything at once, but because they cannot be consumed in return. As the dynasties awaken one by one, as more overlords impose their will upon the stars, the galaxy faces not a storm, but a gathering winter, slow, cold, and inescapable. And in that silence, armed with weapons perfected across eternity including doomsday cannons, tesseract labyrinths, canoptech constructs, cryptex, and Gauss arrays, the Necrons advance. Not hurried, not reckless, but certain. The wars of the present age paint the stars in fire and ruin. The Imperium staggers beneath the weight of unending conflict. The Orks rampage unchecked. The Tyranids consume everything in their path, and the forces of chaos gnaw endlessly at the fabric of reality itself. Across 1,000 battlefields, the galaxy screams, roars, and burns. Yet amid all this noise, the most terrifying presence may be the one that does not roar, does not hunger, and does not rage. It is the silence of the Necrons, the patient march of an ancient people who have already endured the rise and fall of countless empires. They are not a new enemy, nor even a returning one. They are a shadow that never truly left, a legacy carved into the very bones of the cosmos. Every tomb world that awakens is not simply an army rising from the grave, but a fragment of an empire that once spanned the stars, an echo of a dominion older than any other now alive. For the Necrons, time is not an obstacle. Time is their weapon. They can afford to wait, to rebuild, to rise again when their foes are weakest. And in a galaxy built upon mortality, nothing is more terrifying than an enemy that cannot die. The secrets buried within their tomb worlds remain only partially uncovered, and even these fragments inspire dread. Shards of the Khitan lie chained in hidden chambers, remnants of star gods whose fractured power still warps reality. Vaults of impossible weapons, doomsday cannons that can unmake fortresses in a single strike, tesseract, labyrinths that can entrap whole armies within impossible dimensions, and tireless canoptech constructs that rebuild and fight without undressed in silence, untouched for millions of years. Their existence is not theory, their activation is not a myth. They are real, waiting, and every Necron dynasty knows precisely how to use them. Yet it is not only weapons that lie within those tombs. In some dynasties, buried deep within layers of protocol and stasis, there lingers the faintest memory of what it was to be flesh. A lord might recall the laughter of a child, the weight of a crown once worn, or the ache of a mortal body long gone. These fragments of humanity are something close to tarred, dangerous seeds. They can inspire ambition not only to rule, but to reshape the galaxy itself in the image of dreams long buried. A dynasty led by such a figure is not content with mere survival. It seeks dominion, order, perhaps even reclamation of what was stolen when the Necrons surrendered their souls. For the Imperium, the Necrons are more than just another war to fight. They are a question without an answer. How do you defeat what has already conquered death? How do you resist an enemy that can vanish into silence and return stronger centuries later? How do you contend with patience measured not in years, but in ages? The Imperium's armies may bleed, its heroes may rise, its victories may shine briefly in the darkness, but against a foe that counts in millennia, even triumph tastes like delay. And yet, the Necrons do not rush. They do not need to. Across 1,000,000 worlds, their tombs slumber still. Some stir, some watch, some bide their time with endless calculation. Entire sectors may fall without the Necrons ever raising their voices, simply by the inevitability of their awakening. 1 dynasty at war is a disaster. 10 are a catastrophe. 1,000,000 moving as one would be apocalypse. And still they wait, because eternity is theirs. So the galaxy carries on fighting wars it can barely survive, never realizing that beneath its feet lies an empire of the dead, watching and preparing. The Orks will fight because they must. The Tyranids will feed because they are driven to consume. Chaos will corrupt because it cannot exist otherwise. And the M-P-E-E-N will endure, because it has no other choice but the Necrons. They will outlast them all. It is here the mind must pause and picture what such an awakening truly means. Not a fleet, not a horde, not a horde-man, but an army without hunger, without fear, without time. A million tomb worlds stirring in unison, their gates grinding open, their legions marching in perfect formation, their overlords raising banners of living metal, cold and gleaming under alien suns. When that day comes, there will be no storm, no plague, no invasion to describe it. There will only be silence, heavy, absolute, inevitable. For in the end, the Necrons are not simply another enemy. They are the shadow of immortality itself, buried for millions of years, patient as the void, watching without blink or breath. And when the hour of their true awakening arrives, when the last tomb stirs and the dynasties march as one, the galaxy will learn the final truth. You cannot kill what has already conquered death.